And my son was with me. We were in.
And good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Schmidt with The Warning, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the 43rd governor of the great state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln, J.B. Pritzker. Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon, Steve. Great to see you.
You gave a remarkable speech a little over a year ago at your State of the State address, and you talked more clearly earlier than any Democrat in the country about the danger at hand. What is it that you saw so clearly where others were still running around a bit in circles trying to grasp what was descending on the Republic?
Well, I mean, I let me begin by saying that I had been governor during Donald Trump's first term, and I had dealt with him as governor, and especially during COVID, when he was not just unhelpful, but actually harmful to the people of Illinois. And he had broken several promises that he had made. And so I start with that, and also my understanding, my knowledge of just who that man is, and then watched him during the 24 election consistently portray himself as if he was, standing on the side of working families and he's going to protect people's rights. And of course, he lied about Project 2025. I mean, I knew who he is, and so the minute that he won, he had already begun to talk about coming to Chicago, bringing troops to Chicago, bringing CBP and ICE to Chicago, that we were going to be the first place that he would go. So the day after the election, I held a press conference and I essentially said, if you come for my people, you come through me. And then shortly after that, what do you know? Tom Homan showed up in Chicago. This is before Trump took office and said, we're coming to Chicago. We're attacking the city of Chicago. We'll be there soon. And then about the first week after Trump got elected or inaugurated, what do you know? They showed up and they showed up with a lot of ICE and CBP, but very importantly, with a whole bunch of right-wing influencers, including Dr. Phil, to attack our neighborhoods and film it all. Now, I'm just saying, those kinds of experiences and my knowledge of who Donald Trump is really led me to believe that what I had learned building a Holocaust museum here in Illinois with the Holocaust survivors was that, people who, are threatening to take away your rights, who are in power, and who are targeting certain groups of people, like trans people, like immigrants, that those are the very people who the next thing they'll do is come for everyone else's rights. So don't think that if you don't protect the first group, they're not coming for the second group or the third, and the Niemöller, first they came poem. So honestly, that's what led me to talk about during my speech the fact that it took the Nazis 53 days essentially to tear down a constitutional republic, and it's people said I was a little harsh and alarmist when I said all those things, and I don't think anybody a year later thinks that I was harsh and alarmist.
The man who interrogated Adolf Eichmann for 275 hours was a German Jew. His name was Avner Less, became an Israeli chief inspector. And his takeaway from the experience, he articulated 20 years after Eichmann was hung. And he was asked that question almost exactly. Did you have any takeaways from that experience? And he said, yes, it gave me my full faith in democracy because there are Adolf Eichmanns everywhere. They're all around us, but they're latent in democracies. They become deadly in an instant in a dictatorship of the left and the right. And I was at Auschwitz in 2005 for the 60th anniversary of the liberation, and it was a great honor of my lifetime to spend a few days with Elie Wiesel, who talked about indifference. And for the 75th anniversary, 95-year-old survivor makes the point that Auschwitz didn't drop from the sky one day. It was built step by step, day by day. And he talked about that the 11th commandment must be, thou shalt not be indifferent to the persecution and stigmatization of minorities, which is what you saw and what you reacted to more forcefully and earlier than anyone else in your party. Do you think that Democrats have come around to understanding over the course of the last year the danger at hand? For instance, you had 7 Democratic senators voted for Kristi Noem. Another 7 of those senators didn't vote at all. They just took a pass. Has the party caught up to where you were early, you think?
I know that it's hard for people, just, everyday people and elected leaders who don't know anything about the Holocaust or don't understand anything about authoritarianism. I know it's hard to come around to the idea that this could happen in our country, even as crazy as Donald Trump is. And so there's some grace that should be offered to people who, took a while to come around. I think that many of them, and I think you're seeing it now with this fight over DHS funding, that many of the people who early thought, well, it'll be okay, maybe we should try to work with them. I think many of those people now see that there's no working with Donald Trump. He lies. He'll cut a deal with you today and break his word tomorrow. And you saw that before he ever became president, even the first time, knowing his history. How many people, when he was building a building, he would screw the carpenter, not pay the poor carpenter what he was owed. And then when the carpenter would say, you owe me, I'm going to have to sue you, Donald Trump would sue him and inundate him with lawyers and make it impossible for the guy to recover. And so I just use that as example of, I think it took a while, I think, for people to understand that this is not a president you can trust. There's nothing about him that you can trust. It's not just his policies are, out of the mainstream. It's that he's not, he won't live up to any of his obligations, not the oath that he took, not the obligation to, to deal honestly, and certainly not the obligation to, avoid corruption. And so I think the party is catching up. I don't want to say everybody's there. There are some that are more forcefully speaking out than others. But I guess, pleased. Uh, I'm not sure I should say that because we're not quite where I'd like us to be. But I'm pleased that a lot of progress has been made anyway, of people understanding and speaking out and doing what's right. The attack on Chicago, predated the attack on Minneapolis. And so we saw all of it and we kind of built our own playbook about it. In Minneapolis, when they went in there, I'm just saying that was kind of I think, a big moment for people all across the country, including former Republicans, people who are currently Republicans, independents and Democrats, people seeing like, this is not going to stop. And it's going to get worse unless we all stand up and speak out. And it's exemplified in many ways by by the people who came out with their whistles. People who never had left their house to protest anything here in Chicago and around and the surrounding area, all of a sudden showed up, to they came outside. Maybe they didn't want to hold a sign, maybe they didn't want to yell, but they had a whistle and they blew the whistle, when ICE, would come with their, masked and unmarked cars to take away their neighbors. So people are beginning to recognize, and I think politicians are following the people.
It's an incredible thing to hear the governor of Illinois accurately use the word attack to describe what happened to the city of Chicago. And how do you emotionally deal with that as a leader? How do you regulate your anger when a masked, undertrained, militarized paramilitary descends on the city, when you can't trust a single word that any federal official says to you about what's going on? What was your takeaway from that experience, and what lessons did you learn that are important for other Democratic governors to understand?
Well, the first thing, and I appreciate your recognizing, is, the understanding, and this is, the thing that will move you as a leader is to see your people stand up and protest peacefully to fight for other people's rights. That, how motivating is that? And I mean, I was already feeling it, and I'm very passionate about standing up for our democracy and for people's individual rights. But even more so when you watch the people around you and people in neighborhoods that, where they've never done anything like this before, show up and they're using every ounce of energy that they have to stand up for the person next door, not so much themselves. So I will say that that's motivating. And then I'll add to that for me, what was happening was familiar. Like I mentioned to you, I got to know a bunch of Holocaust survivors, building the Illinois Holocaust Museum. And in the process of leading that effort, survivors who became good friends of mine, and many have passed over the last 20 years, but many are still alive, and several of them have said something to me that I think is very important for us to recognize today. That there really are four kinds of people that they experienced during the Holocaust, and it's something that I carry with me and think about today. Four kinds of people. There are collaborators, there are bystanders, people who just, they don't want anything to do with it and they'll just let it happen, whatever it is. There are rescuers, people who will take care of somebody else. And there are upstanders, which is kind of the highest calling, where you're not just protecting others, but also putting yourself at risk and to speak out and do the right thing. Um, and of course, when you're growing up especially when you're Jewish and you learn about the Holocaust, you think about what would you do? What would you do if the person next door, they're not targeting you, but it's somebody else? What would you do if you know what's happening is wrong? Would you stand up? Would you do the right thing? Would you hide them? Would you speak out? And the survivors, they know what people should have done. And they also, believed strongly that the only way you can stop something like this, like, the diminution of rights, the taking away of your democracy, and then many worse things that happen to them. The only way to stop them is to do it early and loudly, because every day that goes by when we're not standing up and pushing back, they're gaining power because they already have the reins of power. And so everything that you're not doing to stop them is just an advancement for them. So we've all got to be on alert. We've all got to react to what I've called the five-alarm fire, and we got to do it early. And I think we're a year in. I think it's early enough, and I'm proud that there are a lot of people doing it. But for me anyway, I feel like it's my obligation. And he threatened to jail me, as he has several other people now, including the mayor of Chicago and Governor Walz and so on. But when he did that to me, I said, come and get me, because I'm not going to quiet down ever.
How does that land when someone walks in from your staff and shows you and says, "Well, the president just threatened to lock you up"?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I expect these things now. I know that sounds crazy. Like who would have ever expected a president of the United States to just go after a political opponent and threaten to jail them? But he says things that are inane. He says things that are demented, and then in some cases actually carries them out. And we've seen he's tried to jail, he's indicted certainly some of his political opponents. And so I don't know, how does it land? I guess I feel like this is why I mean, I hate to say, this is why in the end you run for public office, not because you want to get threatened or any of this, but that it's not so you can wear a crown or, have the power, by yourself. It's because there come moments, and I'll tell you a quick story in a minute. There come moments in your career as a elected official when it's time to put it all on the line, because something important that really matters needs you. And you may be risking everything to do it. And I'll give you my example, because I used to work for a guy named Terry Sanford. You may know who that was. But he was the governor of North Carolina in the early 60s. I didn't work for him back then. I wasn't alive when he was governor of North Carolina, but he's the Southern governor that first integrated the schools in the South in his state. And he knew that it was hyper unpopular to do that at the time that he did it, but he did it anyway. Why? Because he knew it was the right thing to do. And, he couldn't have been elected dog catcher, people tell me, after he was done being governor. They had one-term governors back then, so he could have run for something else. But he knew that he was risking his political career by doing it, but he did it because he knew it was the right thing to do, to integrate the schools. Fast forward, I worked for him when he ran as a 70-year-old for United States Senate, and he won. We won that campaign. And what do you know? He was still getting attacked, for what he did back then. They were, masking the language of it. But the fact is that he was under attack even then. And I could see, here's a person that's willing to risk it all to do the right thing. And he did it as a senator on a number of votes that he took. So I give you that as an example, just because I really believe that in the end, that is what public service really is. It's not, that you won an office and you have a title or the honorable or whatever. It's that there come moments when it's time to risk it all. This is if there's ever a moment in somebody's career, we're protecting democracy, we're protecting people's rights, we're protecting our ability to go vote. Now is the moment for everybody to stand up and speak up.
I think that history is going to be very, very unkind to Merrick Garland and to the decisions that were made to not seek justice uh, quickly and swiftly against the people who led a coup against the peaceful transition of power. I think there's a difference between justice and revenge. You are the governor of the land of Lincoln. You enter frequently the chambers that Lincoln himself once sat in, and with malice towards none and charity towards all are some of the greatest words ever delivered by an American president. At the same time, we look in Chicago and we see the images of masked ICE agents firing weapons, hitting a priest in the head, how those men wound up on the roof, how they wound up with the orders to fire, all of that. How committed are you, and how important do you think it is that there be state level prosecutions of criminal acts committed by federal agents? Some of this may not happen while Donald Trump is in office. It may be the case that in Minnesota, for example, that state charges are unable to be filed until after he's out of office. But how important do you think it is that agents who have abused, assaulted, beaten people face justice?
I believe strongly that accountability and in the end holding people to to be accountable and to our own sense of justice hugely important. If we don't do that, not only will this crew get away with it, but our democracy really will be siphoned away from us. So we created something in Illinois that I think others are beginning to replicate, and that's we created something called the Illinois Accountability Commission, and it's headed by two former federal judges that I appointed, and a group of people who've joined this commission that I appointed. And what they are doing is hearing testimony, gathering evidence, gathering video evidence and written evidence, and doing it in public because some of that is being used in court today to take ICE and CBP and individual officers to court, to federal court. But some of it will be used in 2029 if we have to wait that long, when the president of the United States is not Donald Trump. And instead, when people can be held accountable, they have the ability to hold, these individual ICE and CBP officers. Again, supervisors can suspend them. People can be investigated. People can be held accountable, fired, maybe even face prison sentences. And yet none of that, as you and I both know, is going to happen under Donald Trump. So we're going to have to rely on the judiciary. And fortunately, even though there's some portion of the judiciary that isn't on board with justice, most of it is. And we've succeeded in our cases here so far. But much of the criminal charges that will take place probably will happen after Donald Trump is president. And we're gathering the evidence now because it is important to make sure that they're held accountable.
Do you have any doubt whatsoever in your heart that our side is going to prevail in this fight?
I'd like to look, I'm an optimist, and I do feel like, in the end, Americans, the majority of Americans, will make sure that we preserve the future of this constitutional republic. I must say, though, that I wake up on days and see things that Trump is doing, and I wonder, are we doing all the right things to stop him? In other words, he tried to call out our National Guard. We beat him in court, even at the Supreme Court. He did call it out, but they weren't allowed to come onto the streets of Chicago. And instead, what he's done is ramped up the number of ICE and Customs and Border Patrol agents who, by the way, they're wearing uniforms, they're carrying automatic weapons, they are wearing masks and, unmarked cars, and they're unmarked themselves often. And, the question is, if he does what I think that he may do, which is interfere with the elections using these troops, I'll call them, um, unless we are preparing to protect people's ability to vote and doing everything we can, whether it's legally with, great attorneys like Mark Elias, or putting poll watchers and maybe even state or local officials there to make sure people can get in and vote. I worry about if we don't, because right now I think we all know that if the election were held today and nothing was interfered with, the Congress would go Democratic right now. And he knows that. And he doesn't want that to happen because he knows he's going to get investigated. Donald Trump does. And so I believe that we've got to worry about this all year long and make sure that the November elections are safe and secure, because that's the only thing that will protect us from the next step that he will likely take, which is ultimately taking away or even invalidating future elections. So I don't want to say, I know people would like me to express my absolute confidence. And yes, I'm optimistic that we have the ability to do that. I can't tell you that I am 100% confident that we will overcome.
Do you think that it would make sense for the Democratic governors to convene all together and to make a joint statement to the country and maybe even return to their states and convene, particularly the states where Democrats have the majority in the legislatures, to convene special sessions of those legislatures to begin investigations, to begin proceedings, to make some type of declaration or statement in unison, maybe attached to the 250th anniversary of the country about what's at stake? Is there discussion about things like that take place between you and your fellow governors?
So I have called my fellow governors and suggested that we do that. I suggested that we do it in Minneapolis, that we all meet and discuss publicly and privately, what it is that we ought to be doing. And then, as you say, take it back to our states and do what is, whatever you can in your state. In some states, it'll be harder than others because maybe there's divided government. But we in Illinois actually passed a series of bills to protect people who are going to court, protect people going to school, essentially to outlaw the things that ICE and CBP have been doing in Chicago and in Minneapolis. And there are other states that should and could do this. By the way, every state should have an accountability commission, or we should have one national one, because we need to make sure that wherever this is occurring, we're holding people accountable. I told everybody when they attacked and invaded Chicago, I told everybody, pull out your iPhone, or your Android phone and video everything. And I'm not suggesting I'm the only person that thought of that, but encouraging everybody to do it has led to what now is irrefutable evidence in Minneapolis and in many cases in Chicago situations, that DHS and Tricia McLaughlin, the spokesperson there, and Kristi Noem and Bavino and Tom Homan, they're lying. They're lying, and we've caught them on video. We know what really happened. They lie about it and call people a domestic terrorist or whatever when people are just peacefully protesting. I mean, Renee Good is probably the perfect example of somebody who did nothing wrong and was shot in the face. And we had that happen in Chicago, by the way. Two people were shot, one killed by ICE and CBP for doing nothing. And one person recently, Miramar Martinez, spoke before the committee in Congress and is a guest of Chuy Garcia in the State of the Union address that's coming up. She was shot 5 times for just being in her car observing what CBP and ICE were doing. They shot her 5 times, and then they called her a domestic terrorist, and she had done nothing wrong, and yet she, had to recover from 5 bullet wounds and being called a domestic terrorist. It's something that she'll have to live down now. She's asked for an apology. They haven't offered one yet. So we have a lot of work to do, but I believe that the situation is one where we can do so much here if we to protect each other, as long as we are kind of holding these folks accountable, and particularly those folks at the top.
One of the things we haven't had time to get into today, you're one of the most competent and able governors in the country. I could talk for an hour about the disaster the state of Illinois was in regarding its pension funds and a host of other issues when you took the oath of office, and the remarkable job you have done in the state on a range of issues. But as people are getting to know you nationally, a lot of people say to me, when your name comes up, they see a presidential campaign in your future. A lot of people I talk to say he's somebody with the right stuff, has what it takes to go all the way. When you think about Trump and the catastrophe that we're in as a country because of Trump, he has beaten Democratic candidates in 2 out of the last 3 elections, and that is an epic failure, and that's a failure that does not rest on your shoulders whatsoever at all. You're part of a new generation, a new cohort of Democratic leaders that people are just being introduced to now. What is it when you think about that question? That, wow, my party lost 2 out of 3 elections to Donald Trump. What is the main takeaway for you about that failure?
Well, I hearken back to January of 2024, when I was invited, remember, Joe Biden was still the candidate for Democrats and running for reelection, and he invited a bunch of Democrats and Democratic elected officials to go to Valley Forge. You may recall that he gave a speech there about democracy, and he's told us that this was going to be the speech about the theme of his reelection campaign was about democracy. Now, we all know that democracy is, I mean, there's no more important conversation when it's under threat than democracy. But, I learned long ago that I'll tell a quick story. I went to Argentina as a young person with the American Council of Young Political Leaders. And if you ever want to learn about a political system, and that was the purpose of the trip, Democrats and Republicans, we went together. We landed in Buenos Aires, and there was a military coup. Like, if you want to learn about a political system, witness that. And we had to decide whether to go wait it out at the embassy or to go into the streets and rally with the pro-democracy forces. And we decided we took a vote. All the Republicans voted to go to the embassy. All the Democrats voted to go rally in the streets. We went into the streets ultimately, and we found a perch above the hundreds of thousands of people in the Plaza de Mayo where we could see everybody. And here's the point. In the middle of all of this democracy rally, and people are, fiercely trying to defend the future of their country from being a, military junta controlled nation. There was a guy in the middle of the melee of people who had an ice cream cart, and he was just selling ice cream to people in the street. And I realized, and I was 23 years old, but I looked at that and I thought, in many ways, this guy, whether it's a democracy or an authoritarian regime, like, this guy just needs to feed his family. And that's what's uppermost in his mind. He's not thinking about the theory of whether democracy is the best system, or, having a, benevolent or not dictator, but he just needs to make sure he's putting food on the table and taking care of his kids and family. I think about Joe Biden talking about democracy in January of 2024, and I think it's hugely important for us to all go out and fight for democracy. I'm certainly doing it, and there are a whole lot of people that have joined the fight and part of it. But in the end, you win elections when you talk to the things that people are worried about every single day. Like if I go knock on 100 doors, and I've knocked on a lot of doors in my life, knock on 100 doors, if you say democracy to people, five people will relate to that. But if you say, I'm going to help you pay your bills, I'm going to help you earn more money, I'm going to help you, get lower electricity prices, or, I'm going to make sure your homeowner's insurance doesn't go up the way that it seems to be going up all over the country. I mean, if you can do something about those things, that's how you win elections. And I think that has been our failure. We get distracted, we Democrats, from what matters every single day. I'm not suggesting we should lighten up at all on the subject of democracy in terms of our fight for it, but I'm talking about the messaging of the Democratic Party needs to return to, we are all about working families. We are all about the middle class. We are all about the most vulnerable. That we're the party that created Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We're the ones who advocated for and got passed, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. And we're the ones who are going to help deal with the challenges that are coming because of AI, because we actually care about whether people have the dignity of work and can earn a living. And Republicans, and Donald Trump in particular, this Republican Party that's in existence today, doesn't seem to give a damn about working families. And indeed, I believe that if we focus and don't get distracted when Republicans are like, here's a shiny object to talk about, instead, let's just focus on working families. I think we win. We will win every time when we do that. But I think we lost a couple of elections because we got distracted. We, meaning the people running and people running their campaigns, got distracted. And the American people said, maybe the other guy's better.
Well, for everybody following along on Substack today, Governor Pritzker joined Substack today. His first column about his experience for the last year, you can find it at JB Pritzker. You did say you may have a different name attached to it before too long, but for
Yeah.
now, it is JB Pritzker on Substack. And if you follow me, please go and follow the governor. I want to say thank you to you, Governor, for your time. I want you to know that I have absolute faith, and it's faith. It's because it's detached from an intellectual certainty that our side will win in the end. And one of the reasons I believe that is because almost providentially, the country has produced the right leaders in the right moments. Dwight Eisenhower was a lieutenant colonel in the Army in 1939 who had not been promoted in 13 years. And I look at you and I see one of those leaders emerging. And there is a group of leaders that are going to help lead the country out of this disaster, and you're one of them. And it's been great to follow you over the course of the last year as you are absolutely meeting the moment. And I just want you to know, on behalf of a lot of people that follow me, that I engage with on social media, that a tremendous amount of admiration out there for you in the country, for the people of Illinois, and we're proud of you for standing up and being in the fight. And I don't have a doubt that the role that you're going to play in these next couple years is going to be an immense one. And again, I encourage everybody to pay attention to Governor Pritzker, to what he's saying, to what he's doing. He's a remarkable American leader coming into his prime, the two-term governor of the great state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln. J.B. Pritzker, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Great to talk to you.
You bet.